Hello, everyone. Welcome to Current Density with Jayden. I'm Charlie, and today we have an exciting discussion lined up about history and politics. Joining me is my co-host, Jayden. Jayden, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's almost spring break for me, so I'm really looking forward to the 2-week holiday.
Oh my God, sounds great. So, in today's episode, we will be diving into some thrilling historical topics. Cold War spies, famous misjudgment in history, and the most influential leader of all time. So we will explore how espionage shaped global politics, look at inventions that were once dismissed but changed the world, and discuss the leader who left a lasting impact on history. So let's get started. First question, Jayden. What do you think made Cold War such a critical period for espionage?
Yeah, so the Cold War was a very critical period for espionage because it was defined by secrecy. Mm-hmm. There was no direct military conflict between, the two superpowers. Mm-hmm. So ideological rivalry, and there was the constant threat of nuclear war looming over them. So unlike traditional warfare, the Cold War was fought largely behind the scenes, mm-hmm. with each side desperate to gather intelligence about the other's political intentions. So the Soviets actually knew that the Americans developed the atomic bomb before the Americans boasted to the Soviets that they actually made it. So yes. Stalin was like, "Oh, okay, we knew that a couple of years ago."
Okay.
So the stakes were incredibly high, as misinformation or missed signals could potentially trigger nuclear conflict. So espionage was an essential tool for survival, diplomacy, and maintaining that geopolitical power.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. The fact that espionage played such a crucial role in preventing or, in some cases, nearly causing disasters really shows how much the Cold War was fought in the shadow. So it's fascinating how intelligence operations could shift the course of history without a single shot being fired. So, who were some of the most famous spies in the Cold War, and what were their biggest missions?
So some of the most famous spies of the Cold War include Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, Klaus Fuchs, Aldrich Amis, and Kim Fovey. So the Rosenbergs were the ones who actually passed the secrets about the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union and really influenced their nuclear capabilities. Klaus similarly transmitted atomic secrets that accelerated the Soviet nuclear development. Mm-hmm. And Aldrich was a CIA officer, and actually he compromised American intelligence by revealing the identities of CIA informants.
Oh my God.
Severely impacting operations in the Soviet Union. Mm. Kim Fovey, part of the Cambridge 5 spy ring, infiltrated British intelligence at the highest level, and he passed significant information to the KGB for decades, deeply shaking the Western espionage efforts. If we go more into Canada, actually, there's an event called the Gauzenko Affair.
Gauzenko?
Yeah. So this guy was actually sort of a nice guy, I guess, because he was dispatched to Canada by the USSR. Mm. And then he came to Canada and realized, oh my gosh, this place is actually really good. Mm-hmm. You have freedom, people are happy, the nature is good. Mm. And I actually like the way that people live here.
Okay.
And he actually later wrote a letter to the RCMP, turning himself in, and revealing that the Soviet Union already dispatched a lot of spies like him to many Western countries to gather information. So he was kind of really amazed by the Canadian life, and he turned himself in to the Canadian police.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question. Canada has the the secret agency, like a CIA or KGB?
I think they probably might. So they have the Canadian Security Intelligence Service.
Oh, so Canadian
Security Intelligence Service, or the role is to
KS,
investigate. Yeah.
KSA?
CSIS.
Oh, yeah, CSIS. Okay.
Investigate activities suspected of constituting threats to the security of Canada. Yes, I think like every somewhat powerful country has their own intelligence agency.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Korea has a 국정원, right? It's 국정원 is similar, right? But do they like actually do like a secret agency thing?
Yeah, I think they would operate like similar to how the FBI operates, or how the British intelligence operates. Yeah, so obviously there's the threat of North Korea and neighboring countries, China, and that stuff.
So a long time ago, I had a friend who wanted to be desperately member of 국정원, but I didn't know if he passed through or not. But so I remember him.
Yeah, understandably, it could be like very, very difficult to get in here. They only hire the most talented, like.
And
genius people.
physically and mentally, you have to pass like certain, the bar, right? Right. All right. So it's incredible how just a handful of, individual could shift the balance of power between two superpowers. Like the Rosenberg cases in particular was one of the most controversial in U.S. history, and it really makes you wonder how different the Cold War might have been if these spies had been caught earlier, or if there were other we will still don't know about. So how did the intelligence agency like the CIA and KGB influence global political during that time?
So the CIA and KGB, those are like the main intelligence agencies. They significantly influenced global politics during the Cold War by basically they orchestrated all the covert operations, propaganda campaigns, and like all the regime changes and all that stuff. Both agencies aim to influence other nations around the world, shaping political alliances, and then the ideological loyalties follow the political alliances. The CIA's involvement in operations such as the overthrow of Iran's prime minister and the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba had lasting impacts on geopolitics, and those like events, or like some events that the CIA did, are not declassified. They still remain a mystery, right? The KGB similarly fostered communist revolutions, supported insurgent groups, and actively undermined Western democracies. So what the countries would do is they would, create unions, and so famously there was NATO. After the Berlin airlift, there was NATO, and then there was the Eastern Bloc of like the communist countries. So Eastern Europe and like Western Europe, they're split in half. The U.S. supported the economies of many European countries in return for their like kind of loyalty and like the ideology in that region, right? So all of those acts indirectly influence which side the countries are going to be on.
Right. And what's even more interesting is how these agencies were not just influencing governments, but also shaping public opinion through propaganda and misinformation. It's no surprise that Cold War tensions are still felt today. Some of these power plays left deep scars on international relations. What were some of the most creative or shocking espionage tactics used?
I think the like creative and shocking tactics mainly involve clever disguises, gadgets, and psychological manipulation. That sort of like seems like the most what might happen in like an actual spy movie. So the Soviets developed dead drops, which are disguised caches of information cleverly hidden in everyday objects like rocks or tree stumps. The Americans created tiny cameras and listening devices that could be hidden in pens, watches, or even shoes. The KGB and CIA both conducted extensive operations involving honeypot traps. It's kind of like a blackmail operation. They used either romance or like threats to extract information. So there was like the psychological warfare involved as well. Yeah.
The level of creativity in these tactics is almost like something out of spy movie, right?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of like
spy Mission Impossible or
franchises was influenced by what happened at the Cold War.
For example, I think the Mission Impossible is just I think, or James Bond movie, right? 007 and a Bourne Identity series. You don't know Bourne?
I'm not sure.
So anyway, so a lot of spy movies, it's just like this, right? So except it was very real, right? So the idea that the ordinary rock on the ground could contain top secret intelligence just show how much deceptions played a role in this invisible war. So it really makes you question how much of what we see around us is just surface level. If you had to be a spy in the Cold War era, which country would you work for and why?
So if I had to be a spy during the Cold War, I would actually choose to work for the Great Britain's MI6.
Oh, MI6.
Yeah.
Okay.
This choice comes from the UK's like sort of like fascinating position between the US and USSR. And British intelligence was uniquely influential and leveraged information from both sides. MI6 had a strong reputation for their like innovative methods and strategic long-term thinking. And I think joining them would have placed me in the center of all the global espionage that was going on. And we could have, impacted significant world events. I think there's a show that's going on for a couple of years now called Slow Horses. It's on Apple TV. It's about MI5 actually. So MI6 is the international division. So they focus on what's going on in the world, and MI5 focuses on what's happening inside the country.
Oh, okay.
It's like the opposite of a James Bond movie. So you really get to see, well, it's in a modern setting, of course, but you really get to see what the more lower level position spies do.
Okay.
How that dynamic plays out. So it's not always, glamorous and thrilling.
Okay.
But you get to see a glimpse into the whole system and how it operates on a much lower and realistic level. So I would recommend checking the series out, and it's also based on a book series.
Oh,
it's a novel series.
So what's the title again? Slow Horse?
Slow Horses.
Slow Horses. Wow, that's interesting. MI6 was definitely in a unique position, so acting as both ally and independent player in the Cold War intelligence. It must have been thrilling yet a dangerous world where every decision could have massive consequences. Okay. So let's move on to the next topic. So famous misjudgment in history. Can you name an invention that was initially dismissed as useless, but later became revolutionary?
So a very famous example of that would be the telephone. When Alexander Graham Bell first presented the telephone, critics viewed it as a novelty and incapable of widespread adoption or practical usage. However, the telephone obviously revolutionized global communication, and it transformed society, like commerce and like culture. So the initial dismissal highlights the difficulty of seeing the full potential of innovations at their inception. I think, I don't know, we have a lot of like new technologies, novel technologies floating around right now. And there's a lot of opinions on whether this is actually useful or is it just like a small trend and then we'll never use it again. And I think it's pretty difficult to tell because
Exactly.
in a couple of years, who knows what we're going to be like using mainstream. Are we still going to be using the same type of smartphone, or are actually like the VR headsets going to be the future? I don't know. The technology right now, VR doesn't seem to be performing too well, but you know, we've got Microsoft making like quantum chips, and you know, they invented like a new state of matter.
New state of matter.
Yeah, so they invented like a really powerful quantum chip. And
Microsoft?
Microsoft,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
They've been doing this development for like 20 years, and it's supposed to be like a crazy new like development in quantum computing.
God.
So there's really, I don't know, there's no way to surely predict what's going to be relevant and what's going to falter out in the future.
It's incredible how even life-changing inventions can be met with skepticism. So it makes you wonder what current technologies we might be underestimating today. Maybe AI, space travel, or even quantum computing, like you said. So why do you think people, even experts, sometimes fail to recognize groundbreaking ideas?
So we might fail to recognize like groundbreaking ideas because innovation inherently challenges existing belief structures or assumptions. You don't get like something like magnificent unless you sort of go outside the like normal thinking and conventions, right? Experts typically rely on established knowledge and experience, and that makes them prone to skepticism towards more like radical and novel ideas. This resistance to change can result from like cognitive biases, fear of disrupting the status quo, or simply like an inability to envision the broader implications of new technologies or ideas. And that can be hard to do, you know? We've already got this solid system, but if something like really new comes around, of course you have to be skeptic. Will it work? Will it actually like apply into our real life? Human imagination, after all, is frequently bound by past experiences and present understanding. So it is understandable to, you know, question the new things that appear at first.
That's so true. There's a fine line, you know, very thin fine line, and between being cautious and being blind to progress. It's a reminder that sometimes thinking outside of the box isn't just useful; it's necessary, right? So, what lessons can we learn from these historical misjudgment when thinking about future innovations?
I think the lesson that we can learn from historical misjudgments is to maintain openness and humility in evaluating new ideas. Future innovations often defy traditional logic, and breakthroughs might come in unexpected places, right? So we need to stay curious and flexible and willing to, you know, challenge our initial assumptions. Cultivating a diverse perspective and interdisciplinary approaches can help reduce sort of like the blind spots that we might look over and allow us to better appreciate the transformative potential of like seemingly unconventional ideas. So if we go slightly back to the Cold War, so the supersonic flight project for commercial airliners, right? Concorde was the plane that we all knew about, right? It was developed by a joint operation between Britain, France, and European countries, I believe. So it was actually initially a three-way race, sort of, between the Europeans, Americans, and the Soviets. So, like, basically the three um, big influencers of the Cold War. Americans had too much of an ambitious design. So the Boeing 2707, it was a concept that was too much ahead of its time. They wanted to implement a swept wing, so like a sweeping wing, variable sweep wing. So it would extend and then retract at different speeds, and then you would have all of these like high-tech engines, and basically they couldn't develop it with the century, like the technology back then. So they dropped out. The Concorde project went very well, and that plane, although it was a commercial failure, right, the cost of operating that airliner was simply not profitable. It burned through so much fuel. But it flew regular routes until 2003. And then the other big problem was that, it had sonic boom, right? So it couldn't fly over residential areas because people would constantly be feeling like explosions because of like the shock waves created by supersonic flight. But the Soviets actually, they made a supersonic airliner too. This is like much less known. It's called the Tupolev Tu-144. And basically, spies stole the Concorde's design. A lot of it. Yeah. So they stole the Concorde's design. Basically, they wanted to build the plane more for like show, right? It was everything about how to appeal to the public that you're stronger. Hey, we have a supersonic airliner too. They wanted to show that. So they actually managed it to take the plane off the ground, but it was nothing like the Concorde. It was so loud and inefficient and pretty dangerous as well. So flying on the Soviets' version was nothing like the Concorde. But that just shows that you're willing to spy on other countries and like all of that just to appeal to the public that, you're stronger. I guess that was like the whole dynamic of the Cold War.
That's such an important takeaway. History has shown us time and time again that skepticism towards the innovation can hold back progress. Staying open to new ideas, even when they challenge conventional wisdom, is key to driving breakthroughs. And you make a great point about diverse perspective. Often, the biggest leaps forward come when different fields and ways of thinking intersect. It really makes you wonder which of today's overlooked idea might end up shaping the future. By the way, I saw the image of Korean airline.
Oh, yeah.
They changed their logo.
Yeah, they changed their entire brand
entire
identity.
brand.
Yeah.
And then they just wrote, the Korean. Not air, just only Korean.
Yeah, it's still Korean Air.
On the body and the logo color, it was like a red and blue.
Yeah.
But now there's no color.
Yeah, they took the red out.
Yeah.
Basically, they only outlined it with blue.
Outlined it. So
I guess
it's viral right now. Everyone complain about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Personally, I like the new design.
Oh, really?
I always felt like during the past couple of years, Korean Air's design was like sort of getting outdated. The color,
yeah, that's true.
The airplane color, like the mint blue color, was kind of getting old-fashioned, I think. And a lot of like,
the plane is still blue, right?
Yeah,
like
it's blue, but it's like a slightly different shade, I think.
Yeah. But still like a sky blue.
Yeah, sky blue
color.
Yeah, and then they have like sky blue and white.
And then did they change the plane as well?
No, the plane
is the same plane.
They didn't like order like massive new planes, but I believe they redesigned like just one plane for now.
Okay,
it's a 777-300, I think. But I personally like what they've done. It's like it's more aligned with like the logo designs that we're going right now. I know it's like everything's getting flat and angled and minimal, but like
demure thing.
well, who knows? In like a couple decades, we might go back. Like
Right.
my parents also always say like fashion trends always cycle back a couple of like decades. So who knows?
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. So let's get back on track. Who do you think is the most influential leader in history, and why?
So there's a lot of influential leaders, but the person that I picked was Nelson Mandela, because he had exceptional courage, moral strength, and the ability to foster reconciliation in the face of adversity. So his leadership dismantled apartheid, one of the most deeply entrenched and oppressive system of institutionalized racism in history, by choosing forgiveness over revenge, like that sort of tactic. He created an enduring model for reconciliation and set an example for like future worldwide leaders about the power of empathy and unity. I think a system that prioritizes reform and positive, like constructive encouragement generally tends to work out better than systems that severely punish or restrict and degrade human beings. First of all, not everyone's unhappy, and second of all, like you want morale to be good in order for the people to work more productively and produce better results. I think those kinds of systems, as the world as a whole, we're working towards that moral standard. Although not every country right now has the full set of morals.
I think Nelson Mandela is an excellent choice. His leadership wasn't just about political change, and it was about reshaping an entire society mindset through forgiveness and unity. So what's remarkable is that he didn't just fight for justice. He redefined what leadership could look like in a divided world. So, I'm a huge fan of NBA basketball. So every Nelson Mandela Day, Martin Luther King Jr. So they celebrate that the figure like Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King, that kind of figure is very important in history, I think. So his ability to turn personal suffering into vision for national healing is a lesson in resilience that still resonates globally. So it's incredible how his influence extends beyond South Africa, inspiring movement for justice and reconciliation around the world. So, do you think leadership style have changed over time? What makes a great leader today compared to the past?
Oh yeah, so leadership styles have certainly evolved over time, transitioning from a focus on authoritarianism and hierarchical control. You had empires, kings, class systems. That was very, very common, even like a couple of centuries ago. And then now it's more collaborative, right? You have more democratic systems and more inclusive and more emotionally intelligent approaches in the modern world. Historically, leaders often asserted authority through power and dominance. They fought a lot of wars and battles. They wanted to completely have complete control over the people. So that was back then. But today, great leaders are increasingly characterized by their ability to inspire trust, encourage innovation, and communicate transparently. and the willingness to work together with the people to achieve a common good, the ability to empathize, adapt, and genuinely connect with the people of your country has become crucial in a rapidly changing and a more interconnected world.
Absolutely. So leadership today is no longer just about authority, right? It's about connection, adaptability, and vision. So the shift from command and control leadership to more collaborative and emotionally intelligent approaches is fascinating. So in today's world where change happens faster than ever, so leaders need to be agile, open to new ideas, and capable of bringing people together across cultures and ideologies. So your points about trust and communication is especially relevant. Great leaders today don't just direct people, they inspire and empower them. It's a shift that feels necessary in our increasingly complex and interconnected world. Okay, so that's the 10 question I prepared today. Do you want to add any comments?
No, it's pretty fascinating how, the Cold War is really it's really a complicated sort of like a psychological espionage, that kind of like smart little things that you have to do. It's not about like brutal warfare fighting anymore. Your brain power, right? Your brain power warfare matters as much as the weapons that you can deliver. And the effects from the Cold War lasts to this day, right? There's extreme trade tensions with Canada and the US. We have enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world several times over. So we're hinging on all of these like destructive things that we've built in the past.
Exactly.
And I don't know if that makes the entire world safer or more prone to ending humanity. I think that's a topic that can be debated, right? Does having tons and tons of nuclear weapons prevent us from fighting each other? And does that cause like more moral good than harm? And all of these effects we can really see in society today. So yeah, this is a very impactful topic that we discussed today.
Yeah, that was fascinating discussion, I think. So from secret agent of Cold War to historical misjudgments and legendary leaders, history is full of surprise. Jayden, thank you so much for joining me today, and your insights were really interesting. So can you wrap it up, our today's episode?
Yeah, it's to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us for more thought-provoking conversations. Let us know what historical topics or any other topics that you would like to cover next time. Until then, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next episode of Current Density with Jayden. Bye.